All right. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to episode 98 of BIM After Dark Live. Sorry, the intro music was pretty loud there. Welcome to episode 98 of BIM After Dark Live. My name is Jeff, also known as the Revit Kid. This is a weekly live stream where we talk about Revit, BIM, technology, architecture, and really anything related. As I mentioned, this is episode 98, so we're approaching episode 100, which is pretty wild. If this is your first time here, thanks for joining us. I apologize for getting over a little cold here. If you're here live with us tonight on a Thursday night, then feel free to chat as we go through the conversation. I have a guest from the famous Flato Architecture Studios, and I'm super excited to bring him in. And we're going to be talking about really how they utilize Revit. And so I'm super excited because Lake Flato, if you guys can see here, this is my Lake Flato book, House's book. It's actually the binding fell apart. I don't know if you can see it there. That's how often I look at this thing. So I'm super excited because it's one of my favorite architects and some of my favorite inspirational houses to look at. And so I'm super excited to go behind the scenes and see how they utilize the tools that we use, like Revit and Enscape and other design tools along the way. So thank you guys for joining. And we got some returning people here. We got Steven and John and Reggie. Awesome. Got some of the regulars on here. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on the chat. And hopefully you guys have some questions and we feed it into the conversation as we go along. So with that, I think I'll roll in and just introduce Dan Stine. Dan, welcome to the show again.
Hey there.
Dan's been on a couple times. Some of you may remember him from a few different episodes. We've talked about Enscape. I think we talked about energy analysis. You might have talked about Enscape twice actually on the show, which is pretty cool.
Maybe even 3 times.
And I think the first time you came on, you were actually up in Minnesota in the cold, working for a different firm. And throughout the journey, you made your way to Lake Flato. And right. Awesome coincidence for me because it's one of my favorite design firms ever. So now I actually know someone who works there. So thanks for coming on and agreeing to talk about this.
For sure. Glad to be here. And by the way, I think there's like 5 residential books that we have, and this new one just came out by Rizzoli.
Oh, awesome.
Nice hardcover book. I'd have to send you one of those.
Yeah, one where the binding's not falling apart on me. I pulled it out this morning, and I was like, oh, man, it's just coming to pieces on me, but that's all right. That's awesome. That goes to show you how often I looked at it, right? So, Dan, welcome to the show. Maybe for anyone who, before we jump into sort of Lake Flato and what you've been doing there, maybe just a quick bio on yourself for those who maybe haven't seen your previous episodes or know who you are.
Yeah, well, I have a slide on that. How about
Sure.
Share my
screen? You can do that, definitely. Your screen's sharing, so do your thing.
You see my screen?
Yep.
All right. So I always like starting presentations with this awesome annual 3-day weekend we have at Ted Flato's ranch in West Texas. Family and like significant others. It's just this crazy long weekend where we eat and dance and drink and eat and dance and drink and and play in the water and nobody talks about work. It's really great. There's no like side sessions where we're doing business development or goals or anything like that. So speaking of Minnesota, I still keep sharing my bike to work picture there on the right. But quick rundown, I'm a registered architect. I teach graduate architecture students at NDSU. I've written 17 textbooks. One of them's the #1 Revit book in North America. The first book came out in 2003. And I have a copy of that right behind me where Carol Bartz, the CEO of Autodesk, signed the cover, and Phil Bernstein. So I have some blogs and presented all over the place. And I'm the co-author of a resource that came out now about 5 months ago, the AI Climate Action Business Playbook. So the AI hired Lake Flato and Beryl Happold, and then 2 other people from 2 other firms wrote this. And then I'm on the AI Committee on the Environment National Leadership Group. And I'm on a subcommittee for the COAT at the national level on climate action and climate justice. And then last but not least, I'm the chair of the IES BIM Standards Committee at the national level, which is Illuminating Engineering Society, not the energy modeling one, the energy modeling IES.
So no qualifications at all for being on this then, is what you're saying.
No.
That's awesome. No, great. So
sort of faking it until I make it.
That's right. So as I mentioned, when you first came on the show, you were up in Minnesota and you made your way down to Texas. So maybe for those also who are here who maybe don't know much about Lake Flato and sort of what kind of work that you guys do. What kind of work you're known for, and sort of the history of the firm. Maybe spend a couple minutes just informing people who maybe don't know. I'm assuming a lot of people do, because
Sure.
I do think that within the architectural realm, I think Lake Flato's pretty well known. Flato's pretty well known.
Yeah.
But it's always worth doing a little rundown and letting people know, especially since you've got the inside scoop.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Well, as luck would have it, I have some slides for that. So we're based in San Antonio. Well, we're based in Texas. Our main original office, whatever you want to call it, the bigger office is in San Antonio. We have another office in Austin. We've been the AIA Firm of the Year, and just before the pandemic, Architect Magazine ranked us the #1 firm. We've won more of the AIA Top 10 awards than any other firm in the U.S., a total of 14. We've been an AIA 2030 commitment signatory since the year it came out. And we have some books like we talked about. And I guess this will be coming up too, but with I'll talk about that in a minute. The Time Magazine Award, that's pretty cool that we got last year. Also, there was a CBS special, America by Design Architecture, and our Southern Mississippi Marine Research Center, which won 2 national AIA awards last year as well, also won the final episode. It won it was decided to be the best project that they looked at in the series, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
And we have 5 studios, residential, which we're going to be mainly talking about today, but learning, higher education, eco-conservation, and urban development. Higher education, we have projects at Cornell and UPenn, and do work all over the country, as this next slide shows. About half of our work is regional, and the other half is national. A few international projects, but not too many. But back to residential for a minute. Depending on if you look at number of employees, square footage of project, or cost of project costs, our residential group of the 150 people that work at Lake Flato is between 35 and 50% of the company.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big part of what we do.
Does that include larger scale residential in that group, or small scale residential?
What do you mean by large versus small?
Like multifamily, apartment building, whatever. I mean,
Yeah. No, it doesn't
kind of
include multifamily. That's sort of in the lower right in the urban development.
Wow. So that's a big percentage for single family residential then. That's awesome.
Yeah. That project in the lower right there, by the way, is won a Top 10 award. It's an urban renewal, redevelopment, and it used to be a brewery here in San Antonio, and it's really pretty cultural hub of the city now. It's pretty cool. We didn't do all the buildings, but we did the master planning and some of the buildings. And our eco-conservation group does a lot of botanical gardens and environmental learning centers, and a lot of things that connect to nature and are especially high sustainability focused. Here's a few examples of the COAT Top 10 awards in the lower left. One of them that we won for was a grocery store, HEB, which is a pretty interesting thing that I learned about quickly when I moved to San Antonio, is the grocery store that has 100,000 employees based here in San Antonio.
Wow.
It's an
That's
amazing.
quite a building for a grocery store as well.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. And I guess that's it for the intro stuff.
Awesome. No, that's awesome. So that's actually pretty cool. So, one of the things, part of what I've been doing this season, so these sort of 10 episodes of BIM After Dark Live is kind of trying to focus more on the single family residential. I think especially in the Revit world, it tends to the specialties tend to go larger scale, and most of the people that are sort of talking about how we're using Revit and whatnot are probably doing it at a larger scale. And I just think it gets a little bit of not a bad rep, but on the residential side of things, single family, I feel like it just doesn't have as much of a rep as it does on the commercial, large, whatever, anything bigger than a single family house, basically. So so that's
Right.
part of the reason why I thought it'd be great to reach out and sort of get a sense. And I'm super excited that you mentioned, because I was curious. I know Lake Flato, and because of single family housing, knowing that they do other work, and definitely loving the aesthetic and the design of the other work, but I didn't realize that even though the firm has grown over these years to, what'd you say, 150 now, I think it was,
Yep.
there's still such a huge chunk of the work that is still single family residential, which is really cool. Like that's super
Yeah.
neat. And so I'm curious then. So and I believe you went from a firm that was much larger market sector, right? I think for the most part, coming
Yeah.
into it.
So, well, it was yeah, it was a multidiscipline firm. The
Mm,
architectural practice did most of the same things. It had a pretty healthy single family
mm,
and multifamily, low income multifamily housing
mm,
studio. But most of the other things were the same, except for they also did healthcare, talking
yeah.
about big projects.
Yeah.
The last project I was working on before I left that firm was a nearly $1 billion hospital that
Hmm.
was being designed in part by Ewing Cole out
Yeah.
of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had in-house MEP and structural and civil and survey and landscape
Hmm.
architects, and um, they had, yeah, lots of other sort of industrial type things too. So almost 300 people in the firm, and yeah.
Yeah, and so it's usually a little bit of a different approach to Revit based on those scales, but kind of the same, but definitely different. So I'm curious at Lake Flato, how are they managing the market sectors? Is there a Revit sort of a template for each market sector, or is it scale of project? Is it, I mean, because it probably makes sense to have one for residential, but then are you kind of managing the market sectors that are very unique that way, or is it more of just single family residential and then kind of everything else in sort of a Revit template setup?
Yep, the latter.
It
So
is, yeah.
this is the same at my previous firm,
Mm-hmm.
and at my previous firm we had discipline templates as well.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think maybe I mentioned this before. I can't remember, but at the previous firm we partnered with CTC Software. They used to be our reseller at the time and made this Revit MEP productivity pack.
Mm-hmm.
So we invented it and then partnered with CTC to sell it and promote it. And let's see, it was January 2020. Right here is this plaque is a ACEC award I won for helping create this thing that lots of MEP firms around the country use. So, anyways, back to Lake Flato, we have a residential template and then we have a commercial template. And the commercial template, there's a lot of similarities between the two as well, but
Mm-hmm.
there's just the sheets for a residential project and a few of the standard details that you might have, in the way the schedules are organized for those kind of projects for
Mm-hmm.
construction and whatnot. But interestingly enough, our residential studio only uses Revit. They don't use SketchUp or any other modeling tool. They do a lot of hand sketching and
Mm-hmm.
model building, as you'll see in a little bit. Um, Both analog and digital sketching is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
All of our conference rooms are Zoom rooms, and there's a really big 65-inch Dell touchscreen, and the architects are drawing. I walk by conference rooms all the time, and I help design those rooms because we just remodeled our office. And big smile on my face when I walk by and see people they spent a good 20 minutes drawing all over the screen, and everybody in Zoom can see it. And we actually all have tablets too, and we use VMware to remote into a high-powered desktop. So they're drawing all the time with the stylus on their tablets as well, the PC-based tablets.
That's awesome. So I think what we could do, maybe just to get everyone's juices flowing, is probably jump into maybe a Revit file pretty quickly. I think it would be great just to for people to start seeing. And I think I have a ton of questions probably from that. The first one actually, while maybe you're getting whatever it is set up in the background, sort of just because I do kind of want to ask questions about sort of the template, the style, the setup, whatever, just things like that within geek out in the Revit side. But I'm also curious. You mentioned multidisciplinary firm and where you came from, and Lake Flato doesn't do any engineering in house, right? It's all architects, or is there some engineering in house?
Yep. All architects and some interior designers.
Yes. So I'm curious on the residential, single family residential, especially. I know. Is there the outside consultants within that realm? Are you seeing a lot of Revit usage, and to what extent are you seeing on the single family residential, or is it sort of a location based? Is it size of the house based? Like what are the factors that play? Because I mean, that's one of the things on the residential side where you start seeing the A&E or the engineering firms for the commercial side have clearly grasped it. Some are further along than others, but for the most part, I think we've got most of the structural engineers and the engineers, the mechanical engineers and stuff working with us in Revit. But I know that's not always the case in the residential side. So I'm curious on the single family side, like what are you guys seeing for some of these houses?
There's a lot of variables, like you said, and so structural tends to be Revit quite often, and MEP varies. I mean, sometimes depending on the project, MEP is still design build, and not necessarily part of the document.
Even structure, I guess, depending on stick frame. If it's a stick frame, you may not even pull in a structural engineer, or maybe just have, it's a smaller role. But I was curious to see. I know there are some of the houses and the designs probably require an engineer just because of the unique structural setups and stuff. So I was just curious as to what. I mean, are you finding that are there specialized engineers that end up coming into play, or are they some of the bigger ones that you might work with on commercial that are doing some of the residential with you guys?
They're not the same typically. Sometimes we might work with a specialty sustainability consultant that we've worked with on other projects. We often do a lot of that work ourselves. Because we're part of the AA 2030 commitment, we're doing energy modeling on all of our projects, and we often use Climate Studio, which is an add-in for Rhino, to do daylighting analysis, which is a pretty easy export of Revit model to Rhino, and set up the glass settings and run some spatial daylight autonomy and annual sunlight exposure calcs and glare.
So there was a question before we jump into maybe a Revit file. There's a question about Lake Flato itself. I guess people are, because 3 or 4 people already asked it, are interested in and maybe you don't know this off the top of your head, but what's the ratio? I guess the number of, they say drafters. I don't like the term drafter anymore because of what we do, but drafters versus architects. So maybe designers versus modelers versus whatever, job captains. I don't know what the roles would be called, but you get what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's an easy answer. We only have architects working at Lake Flato.
Okay, got it. Cool. So that's an easy answer. Super. Awesome. So why don't we jump into an example Revit file, and then we'll bounce around to some other topics within that. But I think that'll be a great place to get everyone's juices flowing. And
and we have some interns, of course, that are architecture undergrad and graduate level students, but they're not technically architects. One thing I was going to share right off the bat is with our door content. So here's some examples of our residential door content. and we have a parameter in them so that they open, which isn't too uncommon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to come back to that in just a second. And then we've taken quite a bit of care
Oh, look at those
in
materials.
mapping the
Mm.
materials
Can
to
you
be.
zoom into that a little more for everyone? Can you potentially zoom into that a little more? Maybe scroll, because that's awesome. So if you can't see it, you're seeing the wood grain follow the panels, basically how it would be. I mean, you could see it there with the line work, I guess, but that looks
Yeah.
awesome.
And so what's particularly cool is this ability to open and close doors
Mm.
with a keyboard shortcut.
Hey, how you doing that?
Yeah, that's the secret sauce.
That's the secret
And it
sauce.
involved some custom programming that was
Is that opening all doors or certain doors or selected
nope,
doors?
nope. So if I select this door, it has a parameter to open it a certain angle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then there's a checkbox that I have to find.
There's already people asking if they can buy your doors. I don't know if they're for sale, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, probably not. Where is the checkbox?
Maybe one day you'll convince them to package up some stuff. Little revenue stream.
You can tell I don't
So
use these
it's
all the
flipping
time.
is it flipping a checkbox to change the value of the
Yeah, so
rotation? Got it.
and if Steven's watching this, Stephen Campbell is our BIM manager.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I mentioned that before, and he actually worked at Revit before Autodesk acquired the company, and worked at Autodesk total for like 17 years.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a checkbox which says whether it opens or not, and so we have some custom tools that were created, and so Harry Madison created a lot of these for us. And there's one
Harry Madison,
that,
Boost Your BIM, right? I believe.
yeah. So there's this one that if that box is checked, which I can't find, it'll open the door.
That's awesome. So let me ask you. So these were all built in house, or did you hire someone to build them? This is all built in house.
Yeah, we built them. Some of them are remnants of things that have been around for quite a while, like Philip Chan. I don't. Do you know him?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He used to be the
He was on.
manager.
He was on the show. He was on the show a while ago. Probably.
Yeah.
God, 20s, 30s episodes. I don't know. I'll pull it up. But yes, he was on doing some advanced family stuff. So I'll put a link below for anyone who wants to see Philip's
he helped
episode.
create our casework workflow that I'll show you next. But anyways, I'm fumbling here a little bit. But there's a checkbox, and then there's a parameter to open the door. And so the only reason that we made this tool is because when you have an API add-in, you can then assign a keyboard shortcut. So if you go to our LF Tools tab, the doors open, I just set to QQ. And so only the doors that have the check mark checked open. And so when I go into the Revit project that we got, a current project we're designing that we got client permission to share, you'll see just the doors, like the main doors open. We don't want all the like toilet room doors opening and things like that. Of course, the hardware is like a nested component that can be swapped out with different types of hardware. And
so let me ask you then, because one of the things that's always a little bit of a struggle with residential, especially highly custom, residential, is like those doors may only work on one project, right? Or on a very select number of projects, let's say, because once you start getting pretty highly custom residential, you may have one unique door for each project at all, right? So do you find that you guys are building a lot of families per project in the residential realm, or is the
not so much doors, but like we make more bathtubs than I care to admit. There's so many things like that, like custom furniture, and so you can see how cool this is. You can be in a project and then just you have to go back to Revit. That's why I kind of
Hmm.
split this so that you can see the doors opening.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's awesome. The keyboard shortcut's pretty cool. I have to say that's a neat little tip there.
Yeah. And that allows us just to do it really quickly. We do a ton of VR as well.
Hmm.
So that's one way we are able to immerse a client in a space and allow them to see the materials and
Hmm.
kind of
So,
office. We have 3 dedicated VR spaces that are wireless connected to
mhm.
high-powered desktops.
That's awesome. So materials, I think is a good transition point. It seems like you're using Enscape probably for VR too. I would imagine most likely, or a couple different
Yeah.
things for VR. Enscape. So regardless of Enscape or Twinmotion or Lumion or anything, but Enscape definitely because you're utilizing Revit's materials pretty much, right? What are you guys doing for material management and sharing and stuff? I know that's a question people always have. Is how are people managing and sharing materials? And what I mean by materials is not just material libraries, but the actual textures and stuff like that. Have
Yep.
you come up with anything that maybe people find valuable as far as the system's concerned for that?
Well, what we've done isn't necessarily unique, but we do have a custom library that has some really high quality textures.
Hmm.
So we have this set of materials.
And are you and are you hosting those textures on just a server or
Yep.
an internal server or a cloud server?
So one thing I mentioned earlier, everybody has a tablet and they
Mhm.
use VMware to remote into the computer.
Got it.
All of our
Mhm.
computers are in the office,
So that makes
so
it easier
all
to,
the
yep.
textures are local and
Hmm. Hmm.
um,
Got it. So you're on a shared local drive, and everyone's
mhm.
computers are there, so you don't have to worry about VPN and all that lovely stuff that comes with that.
Unfortunately, I'm working offline here. I'm not in my office computer.
Speaking of, you're not connected to that to that local server.
Hmm.
that's
Yeah,
that's all right.
'cause I just decided to make it all local and not connect to the office. So, anyways, we have some really great textures that are set up with bump maps
Hmm.
and reflective surfaces. If we have time here at the end, I have a sample model I can open, but I'll have to jump through a few hoops. So maybe while we're answering questions or something, I can open that.
Yeah, no, I think we could probably stay on the topic of families and sort of because I think in the residential realm that is an important thing. I think probably in that sector more than any, I think being able to build your own custom parametric families is super valuable. I think on a larger commercial sector, you may be able to set up a standard library for very typical things that almost might even appear on every project to some level. But but I think on the custom residential, you end up doing more custom stuff. So I'm curious. We talked a little bit about doors. You showed these awesome door families. What about things like you're looking at right now as casework? Is there a library that you guys have built that sort of applies to a lot of projects, or is it something where you're kind of a la carte as well with that?
So this is a method that we've been using for years, like way before my time. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, I even seen Philip Chan present on it at a RTC once. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and although I'm generally not a big fan of misusing categories, there are always exceptions to the rule.
Yeah, yeah.
This is one of those cases where all of our casework is curtain wall. So what you're looking at here is the super flexible curtain wall. And if I go to create similar,
This is gonna. I think I've actually seen the presentation too, so this is gonna blow people's minds. I think,
yeah,
and some people might blow their minds in a bad way, but I
yep,
promise you, it's cool. It's think outside the
yeah.
box, little guys. Think outside
First,
the box.
first thing is to set it to to make sure you set it to non-room bounding.
Yes, yes.
But yeah, it's all, we select this curtain panel and then go to the drop down and search for CP. There's a toe kick, and you can pick different depths. And then you can start splitting this up any number of ways. So we're just adding mullions. I'm sorry, not mullions, but grid lines. And then you select one of these sections and just CP to narrow things down. And then there's casework, 1 door, 2 door.
In those panel families, do you have a pretty wide variety of them based on style and approach to the projects, or are they kind of getting modified a little if there's something unique for one specific project, for example?
Yeah, there's lots of options, and there's lots of detail even. So if you adjust the detail level here, you can see that there's no reveal. And then if you turn on the detail level, you can see a reveal, which is important in Enscape. The countertop is a mullion. And then anywhere you don't want a panel, you would just set it to the void option. So the space between the base cabinet and the wall cabinet. And of course, these are really deep. So you draw a separate curtain panel for the wall cabinets, but set that to empty. And now there's nothing there.
So there's Karen asked what she said, what's the reasoning, but I'm gonna ask it a little differently. It's like, what do you see as the pros and cons of this method of modeling case
Yeah,
work?
that's a really good question. And the positive or the benefit to this is just how flexible it is. We're almost always designing custom casework, right? So this allows us to slice it up. Like this drawer plate is defined by the fact that a curtain grid was added there. So that drawer height can be any height it wants, and it can stop anywhere we want it to. We can add another vertical here and have a drawer here, but not a drawer there. You can see the top of this. You can edit profile and make it conform. You can add end panels. So this is just a mullion that's an end panel. So it's just super flexible. And it's the way we've always done it, and it's super easy to show somebody new in the office how to use it. They seem to pick it up with no problem. And but the key, particularly for our energy modeling workflow that considers curtain panels, is to make sure it's set to not be room bonding.
Right.
And then rooms ignore it. The energy modeling workflow ignores it.
So, I mean, would having built them both ways, what would you say are the cons, other than making sure they're not room bound to this method, as opposed to highly custom parametric casework families themselves?
Yeah, the cons.
I know you don't want to bash what they're doing, but
No, I mean I'm happy to be honest. And I don't know, there's really not too many cons, to be honest. Like backsplash, isn't something that's built into a mullion, right? But that's something that can't be shown here if that's what you wanted, without modeling in something separately.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it cuts in section properly because you can see that it has depth to it. And
yeah, sections and details probably look fine, right? I would imagine. I could see having the curtain wall element there for especially for untrained users might cause issues, but no, I think it's I'm not sure 100% how I feel about it, but I do think it's a neat approach to it, which is pretty cool, especially for like the example you're showing right there, where you have this sort of this tall, interesting wall of casework to be able to sort of build it out and be flexible is pretty
Yeah, and the Revit project I'm going to show you in a little bit has this everywhere. All the
awesome.
casework you see, you'll see it.
Awesome.
I think we could maybe start in
Yeah,
Enscape
yeah.
and then work backwards to the Revit model for that particular project, just
So
because it's
yeah.
super cool.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do that. So what I'm going to do is we'll take a quick break for a quick ad roll for the sponsor of this episode, and then that'll give you time to get ready if you want for the example project. Then we'll jump into a full project here. So with that, actually. Sorry, there's a little trigger happy on the button there, guys. So revitfamily.biz, speaking of custom families, custom doors, custom cabinets, that is a place where you can grab custom residential cabinet packages by Brenton Weiberg, who was on the show a couple weeks ago, and also doors and window packages. And so you may not be able to get the sweet swing-in ones that Dan just showed you, but Brenton's got some really awesome ones that I use all the time for my residential work. And Brenton was not only nice enough to sponsor this season of BIM After Dark Live, but it was also nice enough to offer 20% off to you guys for any package or bundle on his website. So head on over to revitfamily.biz, check out the families that Brenton has to offer, and use Revit code RevitKid23 to save 20% off. All right, so with that in the background, Dan has been opening a few things to jump through, and I think we're going to walk through a sample project that's a little more developed than just the examples you were just showing, and sort of see how some of these things unfold. And I think this will be super excited. I'm super excited to see on the back end of how some of this works and how these projects unfold.
And maybe while that's opening, I'll just share a couple other slides. So
Yeah, sure.
A residential project we did in Austin, Texas with Icon as our client and the developer of this proprietary 3D printing technology. We designed this 3D printed house called House Zero, which is pretty cool. It won a Time Magazine Best Innovation and Design Award last year.
It's awesome.
And then another thing that we've done in the residential realm is this modular housing. We've been actually working on this for close to 10 years. And it's we have a website you can check out called Porch House.
Definitely worth checking out, by the way, guys. Not only some cool concept images and showing the process, but the projects themselves are awesome projects.
Yeah, so this is just a quick example of the page, and there's these modules that you can pick that are, basically high design, but modular and economical approach to housing. And this isn't really residential, but this is kind of cool. Some other projects just to show the range of what we do. Some cool geometry stuff. This is a park in San Antonio and a plaza that's currently under construction in Scottsdale, Arizona, that has some cool stuff. But in terms of design process, there's one thing I wanted to share that's kind of fun. So this is our office in San Antonio, the one we just remodeled, and it's kind of interesting. There's kind of no backside. There's both sides are on a street. There's no alley, and there's no gap between the building. There's just a recess there. So this is our building. It's a block and a half from the Alamo in San Antonio. But this is also a building that we own. You can see there's a gated kind of parking area there. But this building is our wood shop. And right now we don't have our elevators being upgraded. So all bikes are being parked in here. They normally go in the basement in our office. But so with that said, we make a lot of things, including models. So you can see there's models like this is our lobby, and this is one of the studios. So there's lots of actual models, and in addition to doing VR. Oh, back here, we built some of the furniture in our office too, like this collaboration table. We built this ourselves, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
All right, here's the Revit model opened up into Enscape.
Awesome, sweet. So we get to start with this beautiful Enscape scene first and then roll into the Revit.
Yeah, and then we'll look at the Revit model. So while I'm going through this, I'll also tell you an interesting fact that Lake Flato's never used AutoCAD.
I didn't know that.
Like a lot of firms had transitioned from AutoCAD to Revit, right? Well, they've been using AutoCAD now. They've been using Revit now for many years. I don't remember exactly what year they started, but prior to that, they used a CAD program called Eris.
Ooh.
And I never heard of it for myself.
I've never heard of it either.
A lot of people who have. So anyways, isn't this amazing view?
Oh, that's awesome.
So I just, going straight forward, we went right through the whole house.
Everything.
And there's just a lot of amazing vegetation. You can see that bush blowing in the wind. And I'm going to go down here just to kind of spin around and go back in through the entry.
Everyone's super pumped about the wood shop, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, this is it's the coolest little building. Like all these tourists walk by it, going to the Alamo, and they don't. It still just has the old name of the business that used to be in there when Ted Flato and David Lake bought it from them.
So while you're running through this, there was a question from Karen, I think. Karen, yeah, about was there a cognizant decision to use Enscape over any other real-time rendering, or are you using a little bit of everything, or what would you say would be?
Yeah, that's another great question. So we own, like the company, we do have a lot of people who use SketchUp in other studios. We use Rhino quite a bit. But as far as visualization tools, we only use Enscape, other than Photoshop and hand sketching. And what's amazing about that is, and we've developed all this custom content, is because it's so easy to use, and we have license enough for everybody who needs it. 80% of our staff use Enscape, the design staff. So it's
interesting because I always find that one of the limitations of Enscape is the out of the box library, right? And I know for a fact that you've got an incredibly large custom asset library that you guys have built over time, which I think makes it a huge benefit because, and I've mentioned this many times on the channel, as a design tool side by side, it is a great tool to enhance your design workflow.
Yeah, and to be honest, I've always said that Enscape is not the best rendering software, but it's by far, in my opinion, and I'm biased, and they pay me money. Like I write blog posts for Enscape, and like once a month usually. I don't do those for free. They actually pay me to do it. I'm not gonna lie, but it's by far the best ecosystem. Like we can do panoramas for Ulio. We can get into VR in 15 minutes on this project, from Revit to Enscape to being in VR. We can walk a client through this, on our tablets, remoting into the high-powered computer, which is amazing. But yeah, it's the same kind of value proposition when Revit originally came out. There was people who didn't have content, had a little bit more of a struggle getting up and running, like that elevated plant. So this is actually still part of the bedroom right here. So that's why the hallway is kind of narrow. So there's a really cool desk right there.
Oh yeah, look at that.
It's sort of below ground. And then there's one of our tubs that I mentioned. Really amazing tub.
There was actually someone in the chat who used Eris, believe it or not.
Yeah, nice.
Apparently.
We have clothing on hangers, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, those visuals look awesome.
And so, of course, this other one is going to have men's clothing on hangers.
And I'm assuming that built-in cabinet is a curtain wall.
Yep. all the casework that you'll see is curtain wall. And you can see the quality of these textures. Or this stone.
Yeah, these textures look great.
Stephen and I were messing around with that a little bit right before this. And I think we might have. It looks a little wonky right there, but I'm just going to keep kind of wandering through and just impress upon you about the amount of detail, not only in the Revit model, there's a green roof, several of them throughout the project, but in terms of the assets, the carpet that's set up using
everything,
like the carpet texture and the soft assets. One of the things I wanted to I'll segue into for a second relating to the custom content. So we get content from basically 3 places typically, if Enscape doesn't have it, maybe 4 actually, because Render People. So we bought a lot of Render People assets so that we can have more poses and better diversity.
And what file type are you using from them, from Render People?
So we'll get an OBJ file. And so here's a blog post they wrote on like Flato and using it to create more diverse renderings. This is a passive house environmental learning center in Chicago, in north of Chicago in Illinois. So all of this content you see here is custom content we bought from them and then basically added to our custom asset library. We'll buy content from TurboSquid, but even if you can get some good geometry from SketchUp, Trimble 3D Warehouse, you can bring that into Blender and add textures that will make an excellent Enscape asset. So what used to be, only good in SketchUp, like all of our assets now too work in SketchUp, Revit, Rhino, which is really amazing. And then the last thing, I guess the fourth thing, is we'll use the Polycam software that you've promoted on your channel before. And so here's a scan of me. Here's one of my over 150 plants I have in my house that are all now in our custom Enscape library. And so Steven's gotten really good at like isolating the geometry for the head versus the rest of the body when we decimate these, because they're too high of a poly count for real-time rendering.
I was going to say,
so if you try and decimate the whole thing, the face gets messed up. But if you separate the two in Blender, you can get a really good result. Oh, one other thing, I'm jumping all over the place, but
it's okay.
I got permission to show snippets of a snowy rendering in Enscape. So we bought trees from TurboSquid. They're typically OBJ files that we download that have snow on them. And then some other things like the skier, which this is kind of blown up because this was like a foreground of a building. That this is heavily redacted because I can only show little bits of it. But this is all like 99% Enscape, which is really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. So are you doing with the custom assets similar to custom materials? You're hosting that library and everyone's pulling from the same custom asset library?
Exactly. Yeah. They're all on the server because we're technically all our computers are always in the office 100% of the time.
And now are you using folders, categories? How are you organizing some of this stuff?
Yep. So actually, I think I wanted to just have all this stuff offline so I could.
It's live, so we don't want to. I don't want you to blow yourself up, but let's see.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, you can see because Enscape now supports custom folders or categories.
Yep.
We have all of this content, and we do ranches, so we have horses, and
Hmm.
we do museums, so we have dinosaur bones.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to scroll down because I think this might still have, see how we have this private
Mm.
customer object?
Got it.
We'll have some actual artwork that
Hmm.
we'll add to Enscape in the Revit model. Um, some 3D artwork, things that, we're designing the house around potentially.
Hmm. So what the Enscape scene is beautiful, right? The amount of detail, I mean, I say it all the time that in renderings, it's half the time it's all the shit that doesn't even matter. That's not the building that almost makes the renderings, like especially real time, that makes them what they are.
Right.
In this particular project, what phase is this project at? Is this, what phase of design are we looking at?
Yeah, it gets pretty quick, but this particular one is in CDs. When we
Hmm.
go into Revit, you'll see it's pretty far along,
Hmm.
but all of this stuff is still in the model, and
Hmm.
we buy really high-end computers, so we're not worrying too much about trying to put things on separate work sets. And sometimes we'll use design options where the
Hmm.
secondary design option has all the assets on it, which means it fails to off, is what I like to call it.
Right, right.
So only the 3D views that you start Enscape from have that have the secondary work set or secondary design option set current.
Hmm. Is that, would you say that's one of the preferred methods for hiding the Enscape entourage for construction
Yeah,
documents, for
yeah, for
example?
sure.
Yeah.
I've written blog posts like the Autodesk community blog, Community Voices blog. I blew the numbers out of the water because I wrote a somewhat provocative one that was don't never use these 5 Revit commands. And one of them was to never use, there are some exceptions again, but generally speaking, never use work sets to control visibility.
Thank you.
That's
I
not
will
what they're
I
there
will I will
for.
back you up every day of the week for that. I don't care what
That's not
anyone
the most
says.
sophisticated, that's the least sophisticated way to do it. There's more sophisticated proactive ways where you're not always, working like you're in AutoCAD. And
Hmm.
work sets were originally designed to control resources, right?
Right.
So if you turn off a work set while you're opening the Revit model,
Hmm.
it's like it's never there. When I
Yeah.
was at Autodesk's office in Shanghai, China for inside the factory, they were telling me that they were helping the design team that was designing the Shanghai Tower.
Hmm.
And if you opened up all the work sets on this really high end computer they had, it would take a 1 week to open the model. But if you turn off all the sets except for floor 64, it would open like any 20,000 square foot building.
Yep. Yep. I used to, there's a couple of people who weren't convinced, and I used to just show them one thing. I would open their files and I would say, all I have to do is click discard work sets, right? Detach, discard
Mm-hmm.
work sets, and guess what? Your entire project is screwed up. All your construction documents, everything's screwed up if I just hit this one button and remove all your work
Yep.
sets. Awesome. This
All
looks
right.
this looks great.
So
Yeah, so
you ready
I
to go
think
into
yeah,
Revit?
let's jump into Revit. I'm curious to see how some of this stuff
Oh,
is made
but
and whatnot.
actually, one last thing though. Sorry.
It's all good.
We're going for a swim. That's not what I want to show you. So watch this. So remember how we basically went straight through the model.
Hmm.
So there's some doors there
Hmm.
and a sliding door here that I'll move this over to the other screen for a minute. I'm going to do the QQ command
Mm.
and watch back here and here. You see the door
Yep.
shut.
They all closed.
Then I'll do it one more time. Wait for it.
There it is. That is really
Yeah.
cool. I do have to say that's super
Yeah.
cool.
Some of these just disappear versus opening like the swing.
Hmm.
All right. So
Let's
we
jump into
go
Revit. I
to,
got some questions about how some of the stuff was built and stuff. Come on, man. Let's do it. I'm sure other people do too, but So in this particular scene, then, what is it? I don't see design options on the bottom hiding. Are you just using the category to hide entourage in this one, or?
In this case, it's all in the site model. So right now it's
Oh,
just the
okay,
site
got it.
models not showing up.
So it's linked. It's
And
the entourage is actually in a linked site model.
yeah,
Got it. Got it. That's another way too. I guess I never thought about that. I guess you could hit the
yeah,
entourage
actually,
while
all
it's
of our
linked.
projects, every single project, unless it's a bigger multi-building project, has two Revit models all the time, every time. There's a building model and a site model. And on my YouTube channel, which has, a couple hundred followers, I did a shared coordinates series and showed this workflow. Or in the
Mm-hmm.
site model, there's a level that's called sea level.
Mm-hmm.
And when we link in the model, like the CAD file, the 00 for the CAD file, is and is at the sea level, and the geometries at whatever level it is
Mm-hmm.
relative to sea level.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's linked into the building model. And so those two things do both, the buildings project coordinates and the site models, survey coordinates, and they're very accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You can get the contour labels, the Revit contours match,
Right.
the CAD contours, because it's all set
Mm-hmm.
up properly. And
Yep.
so you can see there's like a dimension plan and a floor plan. I think so here's the floor plan. And if we go to view templates, for example, you can see there's a real clean list
Mm-hmm.
of view templates listed here. All the things, like if you go into annotation, dimensions, they're just simple.
For
We're not trying to
this,
invent the wheel on every project.
I think somebody had this question too, so I think it's probably a good time to do it. The For your content management, so in the residential template, for example, are you using a content management software, keeping the families on a server and having a way to bring them in that way, or is it additive template versus a subtractive kind of thing, or what seems to work best?
Yeah, it's I would describe it more as additive,
Mm-hmm.
and this isn't necessarily, this is a project that's probably been purged and whatnot, but
Mm-hmm.
this may not even have all the wall types in it, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see there's a lot of things here,
Mm-hmm.
because this is a pretty detailed project. But we use Family Browser, which is the add-in
Okay.
to Revit.
Kiwi codes,
We
or
don't need
no?
all our content in the cloud.
Family browser. You're talking about the add-in, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Kiwi tools.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need the content to be in the cloud, because all of our computers are
Mm-hmm.
in the office 100% of the time, just inches away from the server.
Got
Um,
it.
yeah, so we placed content that way, and that makes it really easy. That, like a lot of the other tools, actually supports systems family, so you can have container files with all the wall types.
Mm-hmm.
That's particularly the case on our commercial projects, where we have fire rated, wall types that have the fire tape symbol sort of built into them, which is, a whole nother session, right?
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, Family Browser is great. I assume, did you hear that Autodesk just acquired Unify?
I did last week or 2 weeks
Yeah,
ago, right? So I
yeah.
don't know what
So
that's
that'll be
going to mean,
interesting to
but
see what happens with that. Kind of like Twin Motion, right? It has the potential of changing what
mm-hmm.
firms do, or what direction they go.
Most certainly. So I had a couple questions on as you were zooming around. The first thing was the large curtain wall system at the end of the pool where the dining room is.
Mhm.
I'm just curious to see the structure of that, and sort of how the wide flanges interacted with the system, and is it all just a curtain wall system? Is it curtain wall with with some steel structure too? Did you use mullions for the steel? I'm just sort of curious because it's the really, really beautiful, design, obviously design element. I'm just curious how you guys approached modeling that.
Yeah, a lot of it's typically I don't know. I mean, I didn't design this building, so
Yeah.
I don't know all the details. We're gonna find out.
Right.
But a lot of times it's actual steel
Mm.
members, so structural framing.
Mm-hmm.
Steven's really good at making custom exposed trusses that are actually parametric and fit the design of the space. So
Mm-hmm.
so you can see there's just a curtain wall designed on or modeled on top of the beam and
Got it.
below the beam.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Not a northern detail. We do projects in the north, but
Yeah.
there's some pretty cool things that we do that make some really slender profiles
Right. They
and
just never ever do around here with
yeah.
with some of the snow and the cold and whatnot. No, that's
Yeah,
super
I used
neat.
to live in climate zone 7, and the frost depth was 5 feet. So
So this is a situation then where, and I think residential, especially single family, where you're modeling most of the structure within the architectural model, and you may even be designing most of the structure. So I see that's a lot. That was going to become
Yep.
one of my questions too. Was was this an example where you had an engineer who modeled the structural model, et cetera? But obviously you could see it's all built into there. So maybe zoom into a couple of the cabinets and show people what the cabinet casework system looks like in place, whether
Sure.
it's in the
Yep.
kitchen or
So
whatnot.
select an area and then use the selection box tool, which opens the default view
Mhm.
with the section box applied to it, right? It's
Yeah.
a great trick. Um, let's see. Switch this to consistent colors. Looks a little choppy in this form factor, but you can see it's the curtain wall. There's curtain panels. So there's a
Yeah.
horizontal curtain grid and vertical curtain grid, and that's what makes the shelf show up automatically.
I'm loving the floors with the TJIs and everything. Are you guys? It seems like you're modeling as much structure as possible, if not all of the structure, when it comes to these type of projects.
Yeah, I think residential, they really like to just
No, it makes
detail it
sense.
really thoroughly so they know exactly where everything is, and
Mm-hmm.
working closely with structural, of course, along the way.
Mm-hmm. No, I think
Yeah,
it makes sense, and I try to. That's something that I
this
usually preach as well when it comes to single family residential. Is like it's totally worth the effort, and it's not that much more effort. Like the structural tools for Revit, beam systems and stuff make it pretty easy to quickly lay this stuff out, and it helps so much in figuring out details and wall sections and whatnot. And speaking of wall sections, I'm curious, especially since it seems that you've got quite an array of experienced Revit users from what you were saying. That's pretty much what they were doing. I'm curious to see how much model elements are in a wall section versus drafted elements, because that to me is in residential is an area where I feel like you can model a lot more than not. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Let's see.
Find your way around their model and get to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might even need to go to a sheet to see this, but here you can see the sheet system is still larger numbers, not just A1, A2, A3.
Mm-hmm.
Lots and lots of details.
Every section's unique, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's the exterior elevation sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, I don't even 100% know what phase this is in, so I'm not sure if this is actually in CDs. It seems like it must be, right, with all these sections and stuff.
That's probably a detail.
That's a detail item.
But as we saw, it was modeled. It was
Mm-hmm.
modeled like that, though. It's the double channel. It's sweet. Definitely, that's not a northern detail either.
I know. That's exactly what I was saying earlier.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's a cool
Yeah, no,
detail.
it's really cool to see behind it. And I was trying to see if anyone has any questions in the chat before we wrap up. While Dan's poking around, definitely. The A couple people asked about the structure being linked in, and we already kind of dug into that. It's modeled there. Somebody asked about keynotes. I don't know if I didn't get to see in those sections what kind of noting you guys are doing as far as some of the details are concerned, if you're using keynotes or not. I don't think I saw keynotes. I think I saw text
Yeah,
notes.
we don't use keynotes, but we have some we have some pretty cool multi-category tags that will combine like instance and type parameter information. Um,
Got it. So using note
and
tags that way.
so
Instance
the
comments.
multi-category tags can combine both the type comment and the instance comment. So the type comment is something that we can have in the component, and then if there's some, variation on that instance, we can edit the instance comment, which gets concatenated or whatever, right, with the tag that's labeled.
Yep.
So it might be steel, and then the instance parameter is painted or primed or something that.
Yeah. So
PP1.
Yeah. So it's not keynoting, but it's smart. It's smart tagging, kind of is kind of the approach there. Somebody asked, this is the second time they asked, so I'll pull it up. I guess they had a keen eye, and they saw on the LF Tools tab the sustainability resources button, and they were just curious as to what that is or what that does. If you can share that.
Yeah, this basically the first three links here go to our knowledge architecture synthesis intranet site.
Got it.
And that has all the
there we go,
kind of workflows, and for sustainability it has lots of information on benchmarks and our kind of workflow diagrams for early energy modeling and daylight analysis and embodied carbon analysis. So having these really easy links here to like our Revit training, like the snowy scenes that I just showed you, the architect who was working on that, just once a month we do a Revit freestyle training, and that's usually just show up with questions and we kind of hack through it like this. And those are really fun, but every once in a while we'll have sort of a planned topic, and so we talked about that, and that's now the recording of it's in this. You can be found in this training link.
Got it.
We have another tool here that's kind of cool that will map all the actual materials painted to the surface to the fake parameter that you would use in a typical room schedule. Right, the room schedules are never connected to the actual materials on the wall.
Right.
But we came up with a workflow that can do that, which is really interesting. This quality views one, it probably wouldn't work on this messy model, but basically it creates these kind of reverse triangles and a shaded area. So wherever there's a shaded area and where it gets darker because of overlapping like filled regions, means that you have views to the outside of the building. And then finally, this program one is something that's really cool that we're currently still working on. It's non-residential really, but creating a room schedule and developing the program in a room schedule. And then you click this button and it makes a bunch of blocks for that room schedule that you can move around, different, stacking diagrams. And then if you delete one and click this button again, it'll recreate the missing one off in a sandbox area, or if you've added any new rows, and then we can color code them by department. And so it's just kind of a massing design tool that we came up with.
So there's two questions I think we'll end with that I think are pretty good ones. The first is, and I think this ties into kind of what you were saying with for anyone who didn't get that, those three buttons at the beginning were intro links, so they're basically links to the internal internet, so you guys can't go to those. But
Right.
what how is the onboarding process with as far as Revit's concerned? Is it pretty formal, or what is it formal training that you guys have created internally, or is it more of just in time training, as they go through, or what does that look like?
Yeah, it's all of the above. It's
Yeah.
formal training at first. If sometimes, we don't always, uh, we we try and hire the right person and not a person who knows Revit, for example. So
Hmm.
sometimes we hire people that don't have any Revit training.
Yeah.
Like I remember, I don't know if we've hired anybody from RISD recently, but I toured it a while back when my youngest was looking to possibly go there
Hmm.
for art school. And they don't use Revit at all. They only use Rhino
Yeah.
throughout that entire architecture program. So
Yeah.
if we hired somebody from there, we would need to train them. And we usually start with having our reseller do it if they don't know any Revit at all. We'll
Yeah.
just hire them to do some one-on-one, or if we can get more than one person, that's
Hmm.
great. But no matter what, Stephen, our BIM manager, always does a partial day training,
Hmm.
and from that he can assess if they need more training. But that is going through all the like Flatoisms of
Hmm.
BIM, where our templates are, how our content's organized, our
Hmm.
materials, and not getting into the weeds too much. But
Hmm.
from there, you can definitely tell if a person needs more training, or
Right.
like you said, perceived earlier, we do have a lot of pretty talented people.
Hmm.
So, once they get immersed into a studio and a project, there's a lot of support there. But Stephen does a lot of just-in-time support and training, and
Hmm.
I do as well. Interestingly enough, too, this is an interesting twist. A fair amount of time we're the design architect, and we partner with an architect of record,
Hmm.
and those present some unique challenges where we're pretty we're basically team players quite a bit in those scenarios,
Right.
and we will take their Revit template and start the project and do the work in their workflow,
Hmm.
which is just, it's really interesting. But
Is
sometimes
that
we'll
more for the
work on
bigger
their,
work, or is that happening on the
yeah,
residentials too?
not
I was gonna
residential.
say,
I
yeah,
don't think we've ever
it's
done anything like that,
unique
but
for that to happen in residential, but definitely on the bigger
mhm,
work for sure.
yeah, yeah. For residential, I think we're always the architect of record as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
The
I
um
guess we never
the
really.
other question, which is I think kind of interesting, and maybe you know this off the top of your head, but maybe not,
Mhm.
is like a project like the one you're looking at, the length, the design length of time that it's typically taking. I mean, I know there's a lot of factors that play into it, but somebody asked it, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Because when it comes to the smaller scale, obviously, it could be one that goes pretty quick, but anyone who's been part of single family residential work knows that it's usually not the documentation part of of a project that takes long with residential. It's usually owners and different things there. But I mean, is in your experience now being there for a couple of years, are these projects spanning multiple years, or the smaller scale residential seems to be pretty quick, a little quicker?
No, these are pretty similar to a solid commercial
Yeah.
project of this size, right?
Hmm.
Because you can tell there's a quite a bit of detail
Hmm.
and coordination that happens.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I'd just be guessing if I tried to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
how long one took.
Yeah,
I didn't
I was only
mention.
I was only mentioning it because I know it can be the single family, in my opinion, can be actually painfully slow sometimes, just because you may be working with a client who it's their first time ever doing this, or it's their only time ever doing this, and so the process can be slowed down by that too. But
Well, really quick, two last things I want to make sure I mention. Brian Como is the architect at Lake Flato who designed this project that we've been showing.
Mhm.
He's also the architect who designed this particular project. Another client allowed us to share some renderings in this Enscape blog post.
Oh, awesome.
So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, I'll put a
And
link to it
then
in the description for sure.
And then one thing that people often ask, it didn't come up, maybe it was in the chat, but these are the specs for
Ah,
my
there you go.
laptop. Pretty high end, an A5500, which has a ton of GPU memory.
Mhm.
We have all of our computers have almost all of them have an RTX Quadro 5000.
Mhm.
And I've tracked because we work on some really big projects, some of the hospitality ones. We can get 14 to 15 gigabytes of GPU memory in use, which is mainly the textures, right? The
Yeah.
mathematical definition of geometry is pretty lightweight in the frame buffer of the GPU.
Mm.
But
There you go. So anyone who wants to know the specs that Dan's using, there you go. And if you have no idea what any of those lines mean, you can check out the episode with Anthony Remise from a few weeks ago. I'll put a link to it where he sort of went through what the hell all those specs mean for you guys as well. So
the new the special Dell CAM module, which is pretty cool.
neat. Awesome, man. Well, this has been great. I think we hit a bunch of great stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing it. I love seeing other people's models. Like it's just it and especially when you start seeing like finished work and then seeing the back end of how it was. So, and I'm sure you felt the same way probably even when you started at Lake Flato to see maybe some models of projects that you've even admired before. So I appreciate that.
Oh yeah.
Any final words before we wrap up?
No, this was fun. It's really great. I mean, what you're doing with sharing all this knowledge. I've gone back and looked at some of your uh, um, presentations on like different things. So super helpful. I'm glad to be part of it and share some of what I know as well.
Yeah, and thanks for coming on, and thanks to those at Lake Flato who gave you permission to share all this stuff. So thank you guys down there. And yeah, with that, I think we'll probably bid you adieu. I will put links down to everything that I can remember from here. If I miss any, Dan, let me know. And also a link to Twitter on Dan and anywhere that you can reach out to Dan if you guys want to follow up with the conversation. Those of you that have been here hanging out, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you enjoy it. We will be off next week, a little skipped week, and then following with episode 99. With Nick from Pure Revit. So that'll be super fun. And then episode 100 will follow that. So definitely stick around and see what we've got in store for that. You guys have been amazing. Dan, thank you so much again for joining me. I really appreciate it. And with that, everyone have an awesome weekend, and I'll see you guys soon.